work at City Hall, she's campaigned against FGM, and her work has led to a very important result. Sadiq Khan launched a grassroots campaign against the practice. The second panelist is by an African women-led organization, Forward. The organization aims at tackle and reduce violence against women and girls, particularly child marriage, but also FGM. And we will have today two speakers, Toxo Okeniji and Paige Nakuyu. Apologies for the pronunciation. So Toxo Okeniji is the head of the UK Community Training and Schools team, where they plan and deliver programs to youth and schools. And Paige also is an officer working on the schools and youth program, and they work on original and innovative ways to reduce FGM. Finally, our third speaker is Janet Chapman. She's the co-founder of Crowd2Map Tanzania, and this is an online project with more than 40,000 volunteers that try to intervene in very rural, underdeveloped areas of the country and reduce female genital mutilation. So this is the set of speakers for today. I'm very happy to have you on board, and please, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Okay, shall I go first? Okay. Thank you, Elisabetta, for your introduction. And I'm so looking forward to being updated by Paige about the amazing work that Forward is doing. So, and knowing that Forward was on the panel with me, and it's an organization that's so dear to my heart, because, gosh, maybe most of my adult life has been spent around being influenced by the work of Forward. I had the absolute pleasure, and I was blessed that I was able to work with the founder of Forward, Sister Efwa Dokano, and we met over 45 years ago. And she was a student then. She was studying, and we started to talk, and then she invited me to the African Center, where she had established a base for Forward. And myself and others were just privileged to support her. And then we worked on the first legislation. We were lucky that we have to say no member of Parliament in our main house, the House of Commons, would touch this issue at that time. They said, oh, it's cultural. Oh, no, we can't get involved with this. Almost as if they were going to be mutilated, really. It was quite shocking. And we found a couple of brave members of the upper house, the House of Lords, who were, their background was medicine. And so they really understood what we were about. And so, unusual for this country, the first bit of legislation about FGM came through the House of Lords and then went through the House of Commons and then was adopted. And Elizabeth, you will know about this because it was framed in the first Children's Act for this country about children's health and well-being. So it moved then into this wider area, which was so important that it was as essential that when we're concerned about any other abuse against a child, that we should not exclude FGM. We should say that this is the most extreme form of abuse in my book, it is, that can be perpetuated against a child. And then we ran into a lot of trouble because we had religious groups. We had, I mean, it was immense at the time. But I think it pays tribute to Efwa Kanu, who left us a few years ago. But when you think that the charity that she founded is now an international charity, is now so well regarded, that without her, I don't think we would be here. And also, one of the wonderful things she did was, I am of African descent, but she was of, if you like, I'll just use the phrase to just differentiate. I'm of African descent, but 400 years ago, my forefathers were enslaved, and so we were taken to the Caribbean. So then that gives me that Caribbean, if you like, heritage as well. But Efwa was from Ghana and had that direct relationship with Africa, and then took the work back to Africa, if you like, with the United Nations support, and did some absolutely amazing things. Now, I've never apologized to anybody about seeing this as an abuse against the child. I will never. So my position is unapologetic. I just say, you know, this practice goes back to the days of pharaohs. So, you know, I think we really should be at a stage now in our development where we say it shouldn't exist. It's a practice as old as that. And of course, it sits with other what they call traditional practices that we still have to deal with. I mean, what can I say? I'm thrilled that now at the forefront of that group of amazing survivors who, some born here. I know an eminent a doctor who was born here. I knew her as a child. She grew up in Waltham Forest. And we have leaders like that now who have done dissertations. We have people who, women who are lawyers, who have been cut or who have prevented others from being cut. So I see myself now as if you like, a grandmother, right? Someone still using whatever position that I have to advocate, to say to those in power, oh, do you know this? Are you aware of this? And it's in reference to what Elizabeth just said. It would be now maybe 5.5 years ago. Sadiq and I were out campaigning, and we were walking up the streets in Hackney, around the market, and this wonderful lady came up and said to Sadiq and myself, now stop. I just want to tell you something that you must do. And she said, you must stop this cutting, right? And she spoke from her heart, and she spoke from a community that she belonged to. And she said, it mustn't go on in London. And I looked at Sadiq, and Sadiq knew because his background is law. And I reached out and I said, I can promise you he will not forget, because I will be there at his side every day, asking him, what have you done in order for us to be a zero cutting city? So Sadiq, as a mayor, has always been on the spot. Prior to that, when I was working with the previous mayors, I did a lot of work in the then Metropolitan Police Authority and work with some leading members. One of them became the National Police Chief Constable, Ivan Balachet, for FGM. So we moved from a position where FGM couldn't be talked about. This was 45 years ago or so, where it was just people were so horrified or so unaware of it that it couldn't be spoken about, to a time, and you will hear more about Paige, where there are initiatives working with young people, working with young men, because of course we know that there is a history where it is grandmothers and mothers who wanting their girl children to be accepted, to be not to be shunned, to be able to fit in part of the mutilation. So I'm so glad when I hear and see programs that talk about, yes, let's look at the whole community. It's not just women, because unless a man is going to stand up and say, I will marry, or I want a girl who hasn't been cut, then that will then give energy, cutting and the practice. So I love it that there's now work going on with young men through organizations like Forward. It's just so important. I also think that for me, and why I pushed the mayor in the direction that the particular programs that he's funding has taken is, for me, it's about education as well. So it's about educating all of the workers, if you like, health, legal, you name it, teachers, so that everybody is made aware. But also as well, that they can develop their understanding with local communities. Because the first call, or the first suss, or the first ideas about what's coming out of a community doesn't usually get to the professionals. It's known in the community. So unless we're committed to working in the community, then we won't actually then build up that understanding, that resilience, if you like, that that working with members of the community, who they are, for me, the starting point. And that has such resonance for me, because the first person to be found guilty of FGM in this country in 2017 was a woman who lived in one of the boroughs that I represent at City Hall. So the same year I was producing a report, and having worked and knew so many community organisations across Northeast London, you know, it was, it's still shattering to know that a 3-year-old child was cut, and that, you know, was a sign that it's there, it's right in front of us going on. So that landmark case took place and was welcomed by all campaigners. And just to share with you what the Crown Prosecution Service said, I mean, again, it's so important, because the legal services were also late coming to this. But the Crown Prosecution Service, the lawyer said, we can only imagine how much pain this vulnerable young girl suffered and how terrified she must have been. A 3-year-old has no power to resist or fight back. Her mother had coached her to lie to the police so that she wouldn't get caught, the mother wouldn't get caught. And she spoke on behalf of the Crown Prosecution and said, and I really support this, that they will not hesitate to prosecute those who commit this sickening offence. I also think that we have to be clear that it's not prosecutions alone. And as I've alluded to, we've got to get as much communication out there, as much education, as many organisations as possible, working with survivors, working with communities, so that we can live in a world where we bring an end to female genital mutilation. I just finished by giving a shout out to some women who I've been following across the world, and they're doing so. And if we think it's tough here, I can only imagine how really tough it must be to be fighting against FGM in Mogadishu, Somalia. And so a good shout out for Ifra Ahmed, who she was able to work with her president to introduce FGM legislation in 2016 in Somalia. And then there's Ifra Ahmed, who was able to work with the United Nations to carry out this work across a number of African countries. And there's Shamina Shani working in Kenya, again, doing some amazing work. And Shamina says her mission is to make FGM history in Kenya. And she is, as a survivor, constantly horrified. She lives with the effect because, as you will hear from survivors, it never leaves them. And so she's saying, if we can save one child, it's one child less who's going to be mutilated. And that's really what we should all be working for. And there's some lovely work going on in Sierra Leone and across the world. And of course, we'll hear from Tux about work that's going on there and other speakers. So thank you to the Society.
Thank you, Jeanette.
And having
Thanks a lot.
Amazing awareness raising panel. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeanette. Thanks a lot. Very, very inspiring talk and a lot of experience in the field. Paige and Tox, do you want to start? The floor is yours. Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much. And thank you so much, Janet, for your lovely words about Forward. We're so grateful to have you with us today as well, and to have the other guest speakers. Thank you so much, LSE, for having us today. My name's Paige. I'm the Schools and Youth Programs Officer at Forward, and I'm joined with the lovely Tox as well.
Yeah, thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. And it's wonderful to see you, Jeanette, and your amazing support of Forward. And of course, talking about FOR, I think it's important to mention that Amazon who brought us to where we are today. And it's a pleasure and a privilege to be here. And hopefully we can share some of our work and, you know, maybe somewhere to signpost. You never know. FGM can be something that's happening next to you, but it's only when you know, then you have that, you know, understanding of the signs or where you could go to ask the right questions, and to get the answers as well.
Yeah, definitely. I'm just going to share my screen. We have a PowerPoint to share. Can everyone see my screen?
Yeah.
Perfect. Okay. Okay, so Forward actually stands for Foundation for Health Research and Development. And as it's been mentioned before, we're an African women's-led organisation working to safeguard and advance the health and rights of girls and women all over the world. What's really exciting is we've been doing this for over 35 years, and we don't just tackle the issue of FGM, we also tackle child marriage and other forms of violence against women and girls. One of our visions is that women and girls live in dignity, are healthy and have choices and equal opportunities. And because we're a women's and African women's-led organisation, we really want to pioneer a generation that is able to see a bigger change and a bigger future for women to be able to have equal opportunities, equal access to services, equal access to better choices with dignity and health. So it's really important for us as an organisation that we uplift the next generation. So it's really exciting to be here to do that as well. So I think it's really important that we define what FGM is, because some of you might not know what it is. So FGM is female genital mutilation or female genital cutting for some communities. For us as an organisation, we would refer to it as female genital mutilation. And what female genital mutilation is it involves the partial or total removal of a girl's genitalia or injury to the genitalia without a justified medical or health reason. And it's recognised internationally as a human rights violation and abuse. And as Janet mentioned as well, it is also a child abuse violation. So we've kind of been talking about when this could occur. It can happen from the ages of 3 to 12. However, it's important to remember that it can happen at any point in a woman or a girl's life. The situation varies. So for some communities, it's carried out by an older woman in the community, and it can happen using non-sterile implements and without anaesthetic. Now, also, it can actually also happen in medical settings, even though, as we mentioned, there's no justified medical reason. So there are actually doctors who are performing the practice illegally as well. So that's important to remember too. In the context of the UK, a girl can be taken on holiday to have it done, but there is still evidence and ideas that actually there are practitioners in the UK. So it is something that's happening underground. And that's why it's so important for us to be aware of it, for you to be aware of it as students, as upcoming professionals, and also for us to support those who are survivors of the practice. So I think it's also very important to kind of talk about the reasons for FGM. I think it would be a good time to kind of hear from all of you, if you don't mind. Just about, you can see some of the reasons here, but does anyone have any contribution? So why would it be a form of patriarchy or matriarchy, for example? You can put it in the chat, or you can feel free to unmute yourself. Does anyone have any thoughts? Has anyone put anything in the chat, Elizabeth?
No, there's nothing in the chat page.
So hi there.
Yeah.
First of all, thank you very much, everyone, for this presentation. It's very interesting. For me, well, I totally agree with everything that is on the board right now. Mm-hmm. And I believe that the tradition in each culture in Africa, so I was working last year for the UN and I was covering humanitarian and especially for Sahel. Mm-hmm. And what I saw was how like there are very entrenched tradition within culture that have to do a lot both with religion, beliefs, and maybe some beliefs that are not really based on something, but it goes on and on in every different.
There's a comment. Sorry for you to finish up. Yeah.
Yeah, no. It's just that I wanted to say that I agree with all of them, and I feel like it's like this mixture of everything and this fixed ideas around subject that are really entrenched into societies.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's what I wanted.
Thank you so much. Did someone have something in the chat as well?
Yes. It's from Janet Chapman.
Okay.
And she says in Mara, Tanzania, adolescent girls are cut as preparation for marriage. Yeah. And girls bring their families more cows as dowry. Mary Garrett says yes, and they don't do it. And if they don't do it, they are considered as bad luck.
Yeah, so the reason why I just wanted to open the floor is because there's various reasons. A lot of the time people just think it's just about, you know, controlling a woman's sexuality, for example. And yes, that is one of the reasons for practicing FGM, but it's very important that we remember that this is a cultural and traditional practice. So as Janet was mentioning before, this is something that's been happening for years and for generations. And that's why it takes another generation to change that practice and to, you know, exclude it. But I think it's really important to remember that it's a form of patriarchy, and there's social norms that are attached to it. And then when we think about religion as well, it's really important to remember that there's no religious, it's not in any religious text. So even though some people believe that it's a form of like religious obligation, it's actually not in any religious text. So that's something as well to think about. It's not actually on the slides, but it's important to also think about one of the reasons given is also aesthetics and hygiene. So for example, when we think about the vulva, some communities might perceive different parts of the vulva as not aesthetically pleasing or not hygienic. So that's why it's then removed. And if we think about the example that Talks read about, for example, if you're not able to be cut, then you have bad luck or you're shunned from the community. There's huge ramifications almost for young women and families who do not perform FGM. So I think it's shrouded in the shame and it's shrouded in a lot of cultural traditions. And what we say as well in Forward is the importance of, yes, we can have cultural ideas and beliefs that are perfectly, you know, fine, but there's some traditions that we do need to set aside because they're actually harmful. And those are the kind of conversations that we have with the communities that we serve. Someone had, I think, a comment or raised a hand, sorry.
Yeah, it's me. I just wanted to know that we're talking about patriarchy, but matriarchy has a lot to do with it as well,
Yeah.
given that it's performed by women as well, and that women, like older generations, have gone through this, and like they advise and they kind of support younger generations, young girls to do it. So I feel like it's kind of from within the family. Yeah, and that's an important aspect as well.
Yeah, and it's about power. At the end of the day, it really is about power. But as you mentioned, a lot of the like the older generation, because it's been practiced for so long, they may not question those patriarchal ideas. So that's when it becomes matriarchal. If that makes sense. But really, actually, it's really entrenched in patriarchal ideas. And when we think about that, it makes us think, actually, we have patriarchal ideas that we want to dismantle here as well in the UK. And it just makes you think as well that it's not just something that's happening in Africa or Asia, it's happening, it's a global issue. 200 million girls are at risk or are survivors of FGM. And just for context, in the UK, it's 137,000 women and girls who are affected by FGM. So I think that kind of puts a perspective on how much we need to really tackle this issue. So with youth, we really just believe fundamentally in giving young people the opportunity to change their community through advocacy and campaigning. As I said before, young people are the future generation, right? So we need to educate and empower young people to change the next generation, to make a change, to have zero tolerance to FGM, right? So how we do it in Forward is we provide FGM awareness sessions. We do provide support services. So if you know someone who is a survivor of FGM or who, you know, needs support in anything that relates to violence against women and girls, we do provide psychosocial support. We then provide training on advocacy, because some young people actually want to be a part of that change. So there's so many like amazing leadership opportunities and social action projects that young people can get involved in. And then what's really important, which has kind of been discussed, is lobbying government and policymakers. And that's how Forward really like started doing their work. As was discussed before, Forward really pioneered the policy on the FGM Act that is currently present now. And we just really believe in lobbying government and policymakers. And that can actually happen with young people. So we're never too young to make a change and impact, especially on issues such as violence against women and girls. So I'm just going to play a quick clip, if that's okay, if I still have the time.
If you have a couple of minutes, thank you.
Okay, I might forward, because I think it's important that we talk about our community work, but I'll share it in the chat after. This was going to be a video about our leadership program, which is known as Tuesday, and it's an amazing young women's leadership program which tackles feminist ideas, and it really has been an amazing way to really uplift the next generation. It's been a program that's been done all over the UK and also Africa, and has really given young people the opportunity to tackle the issues that we've just been talking about. Just very quickly, just to talk about our school services. Some of you might not know, but FGM awareness is actually a part of the secondary school curriculum in the UK, and that was implemented in September 2020. Now, that's a great step, but I think there's more to be done to make sure that all schools and even higher institutions such as LSE are provided with FGM awareness sessions. So it's really good that we're doing it today. So with the programs that we provide with schools, we provide staff sessions, and that's really important because you know, staff are in contact with young children who might be at risk and need to be able to provide support. We provide student awareness sessions, one-to-one support, parents awareness as well. So we work with the community really closely, which Tops will talk about in a minute. And yeah, we provide training the trainers as well. So it's not just us providing training, we then support other young people and staff members to provide training on FGM in their schools as well. So I'll move on to Tox, who will share about the community team.
Okay, I'm going to go through this on a breakneck speed, so bear with me.
Apologies, Tox. Can you try to wrap up with this slide
Okay.
to summarize, and then we need to give the floor to Janet. Thank you. Thanks
okay. The key thing about our community approach to FGM is having a nuanced approach. It's understanding how to support and break stigma, like what Paige was talking about here. FGM is something that wasn't spoken about a lot, but now we have a lot of that. Safe spaces where we speak with men and women. We talk about intergenerational issues as well, what we would call uncomfortable conversations in different spaces, currently obviously digitally. And in order to, kind of motivate and mobilize, and we work with community influencers, key people in the community who are the ones who, especially during this pandemic, have been doing an amazing job working with faith groups, working with communities. We work with professionals as well, because obviously professionals have to have a good, cultural understanding of the community they're engaging with to ensure not just equal access to service, but equitable access to service. We use tools and information to ensure that there is a good understanding of what we are talking about, how we educate. It's important to say here that it's not easy, or it's not the answer or the solution to, criminalize or punish out of, a social norm or a community practice. Education is the key. So we develop leadership. Our youths are you are there for tomorrow. You need to know and advocate. And actually, looking at the theme for zero tolerance for 2021, it says no time for global inaction, unite, fund, and act to end FGMC.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thanks a lot for all this very useful work. Janet, now the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much for inviting me, and thank you so much for the other speakers. That's been fascinating. Can you see my slides? Don't know why.
Yes.
Okay, great. So my name is Janet Chapman. I'm the chair of Tanzania Development Trust, which is a volunteer-run charity that's been supporting grassroots projects in rural Tanzania for 45 years. This is our website, and we have local representatives in the areas where we work, such as Mara, which is near to the Kenyan border, where our local rep there is Rhobi Samwelly, who is a FGM survivor and activist, and she runs her own NGO there called Hope for Girls and Women. Her work was also featured in a film, In the Name of Your Daughter, which we do regular screenings of, which I can send people if they're interested. And it was also on the BBC called Surviving the Cutting Season as part of Storyville. So FGM is illegal in Tanzania, but it still happens. It's particularly prevalent in certain areas. So as you can see, Mara is in the northeast there, next to the Kenyan border. And it happens on adolescent girls during what's called cutting seasons, which were generally coincide with the long school holidays. So we just had a major cutting season in December, January. So what Hope for Girls does, and I was really hoping that Rhobi would be able to be here and say all of this in person, but unfortunately her connectivity is really bad today. Anyway, so they do community outreach, they have set up school clubs, they do screenings of the film about their work, they run safe houses for girls who are refusing FGM, particularly during the cutting season. So in most cases, girls will only stay for a temporary time, and then there'll be a reconciliation with their families at the end of the cutting season. The families will sign to say that they agree not to cut them, and they will go back. They do all of this in very close consultation with community social welfare and the police gender desks. So one of the issues was that in this rural area, the villages are very poorly mapped. So this is why I started a project called Crowd to Map 5 years ago, which is making the maps of those areas. And this is something that we have volunteers from all around the world doing. So if any students are interested, or you don't have to be students, if anyone is interested, all you need is an internet connection. Also, Rhobi has been setting up digital champions in all of the villages. These were women who'd never used a smartphone before, but we trained them to map their villages, to report gender-based violence, and we linked them all together with a WhatsApp group, and they work really closely with Rhobi and her team, and also district officials and so on. Also, Rhobi's been working really hard to re-educate cutters. So in Tanzania, cutters get paid to cut girls. So it's a job. You know, there is a big economic factor in this. So she's worked really hard to educate cutters about the huge damage that FGM does, and also find them alternative sources of employment so that they don't have to do this any longer. Also, Hope has been very instrumental in making sure there have been prosecutions for FGM, rape and gender-based violence in their area. So this is an example of the community outreach. So this Rhobi, as I said, she's an FGM survivor. She's lived in this community all her life, so she knows it extremely well. And they have a lot of events like this that include drama, dance, debates, and so on, and telling girls about and the community more generally about the dangers of FGM, but also telling girls that, you know, it is a human rights violation. They have the right not to be cut. They have the right to continue with their education. So they have 2 safe houses in Mugumu and Butiama. So many girls, particularly during the cutting season, where they had, in the last cutting season, they had over 300, but most of those girls will go back at the end of that time. However, there's always some girls that are unable to be reconciled. It's not safe for them to go back to their families. So they stay and they either carry on with education, with schooling if they're able to, but some girls have never had the chance to go to school and it's very difficult to catch up in those cases. So they do vocational training such as tailoring, or they learn another skill like to be drivers, work in a hotel, etc. But the main point, and Rhobi is very passionate, is about trying to empower girls so that they can be self-sufficient, they can make their own decisions, and they can get an education if at all possible. So they've set up anti-FGM clubs in schools, so which is all around girls' empowerment and also the health implications of FGM. And as I said in the chat, generally girls are cut as adolescents as a preparation for marriage, because when the girls are married, their family gets cows. So, you know, basically they're being cut and sold. I mentioned the film, so they've also done film screenings in many schools. This is what it tends to look like. This was pre-COVID times, but very crammed together. I mentioned about the mapping. So typically Rhobi will get a phone call in the middle of the night saying girls are about to be cut in this village. There's no road signs, there's no street lights. Didn't exist on a map, very difficult to find it. Because rural Tanzania looks something like the map at the top, certainly before we started, as opposed to somewhere like London or Dar es Salaam, which is very well mapped. So volunteers use satellite images to trace the roads and buildings as a base map. And then we train people on the ground in rural Tanzania to add their local knowledge and places of interest, such as churches, hospitals, clinics, etc. And then we train people like the activists and the police to use maps.me, which is a free app to route themselves to wherever they want to go. And this works offline. And then we can start to do some analysis of exactly where the girls are coming from and so on. So as I mentioned, we're training these digital champions, so women who'd never used a smartphone before, never been online. This is a really good way of empowering them and connecting them together. Because if you're in a very rural village, it's very difficult to get those sources of support sometimes. So here they are, some digital champions and some training in the villages about how to use a smartphone. And here's a map of the village where people are adding places that they think still need to be on there. I mentioned about the cutters. So this is a very big step for women. This woman here, Christina, when she decided to stop being a cutter, there was a huge amount of pressure on her from her community. She was actually, her husband divorced her, her family disowned her, but she persisted, and now she's actually an anti-FGM activist, and her and Rhobi won an award for their work recently. So Rhobi is a real force of nature. I wish she could be here. So she was invited to speak at the General Assembly in New York about her experience and work in 2018. And we also organised a mapathon to coincide with that. And we had events in 60 countries at the same time. So we have a huge amount of challenges. She's running 2 safe houses in rented buildings with very inadequate water and sanitation that get no government funding, so running costs are an ongoing challenge. We really want to try and expand the vocational training and the digital champion programs, but money's always a problem. And obviously this and last year have been particularly difficult because of COVID. So it's a challenging situation in Tanzania because basically the government is denying there is any COVID now, which is very difficult. But the schools were closed between March and June last year, which did mean a rise of girls being cut. Obviously, it's very difficult to try and quarantine girls that are coming into the safe houses and so on, because the conditions are so crowded. They were sleeping 4 to a mattress. And there's a big drop in funding going to the safe houses because there's no tourism in Serengeti. And they made handicrafts and sold them to tourists, and obviously there's nobody there. They had big plans to do many more alternative rites of passage instead of girls being cut. So they celebrate courier culture and celebrate becoming women and so on without the cut. But it's very difficult to have large meetings currently. Who knows what's going to happen with COVID in Tanzania at the moment? So currently, court cases and police activity are continuing, but if things get a lot worse, which we're concerned about, then perhaps they might stop. And also, if it becomes harder and harder to do community outreach, FGM may well resurface. And as there are a lot of economic reasons for FGM in this area, there's quite a lot of evidence that if situation deteriorates economically, then families will want to sell off their girls for cows, and so they will cut them to get more cows. And so these are my details. These are Rhobi's details. If anybody has any questions, I'd be very glad to answer them, and hope I tried to keep to time. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Janet. Perfect timing. So we have a few questions from our participants. So I'd like to join a couple of questions. A question that I have together with one of our students. So FGC is enrooted in the society. So we said that it is part of tradition. It's part of culture. It's part of norms. So if you had to pick the first person that we need to convince that the practice should be stopped, who would you pick? Because we mentioned that, it's good to have males involved in the discussion. It's good to act at the community level. It's perhaps good to talk to the community leaders and so on. But at the end of the day, suppose that we have a limited amount of money and we want to really convince the person that has the power to decide. Who do we need to target and when mothers, future mothers, so then school programs seem to be very effective. But otherwise, what are your ideas of who we need to target first? And more on a day-to-day life for us and for our students, how can our students contribute or participate to the debate to help our communities be aware or recognize the problem? Thank you.
So who is the question to, or should anyone just answer it?
Yeah, so for our community of students, I guess, Janet and Forward UK, if you have an opinion about that, while the people that we need to target, it's for all of you. Thank you.
Thank you. I think it's important to understand essentially a worldview and understand that, you know, for FGM is a global issue. And it's not about talking against someone's culture. It's about using facts that they have. It's about, for some people, even when they have had FGM, they cannot link the problems they have to FGM. So that's one of the things that we do. And then when that happens, what we do is to kind of sensitize in the community. And I think that's the kind of thing Janet is saying. We then have to, I think what the best thing, you know, as students is social media. Students are fantastic with that. There are myriad of them, especially now we are in a virtual world in a sense. It's about, you know, your voice matters. It's about using your voice, using that, you know, skills that you have. It doesn't have to be anything big. It's about maybe liking some, you know, comments. It's about being a part of the, you know, communication, the talk. It's about talking about this, knowing what it is. Sometimes it's just about asking, what exactly is it? And why do they do it? And a lot of the what you've heard today. And then I think most students would say, so why is it a problem for me? It's not my problem. Yes, it's not your problem, but it's safeguarding is everybody's business. And the key thing to us is we do what we do in the best interest of the child. And second to that, to do no harm. We are in a society where we need to, you know, safeguard others, but not necessarily put ourselves in danger. But it's just about being aware of what is going on. And if you don't have answers, know where you can signpost people to. And you've heard from Janet, you've heard from us as well. It's about, okay, if it's something about schools, could you talk to this organization? They might be able to give you more information. I think it's more about awareness and taking it that next step.
Thank you.
I mean, if thanks, Tox. Just to follow on from what you've said, I mean, I am a witness to say that we can bring about change. So if we can bring education to the fore, so that's education for us all. But key, it's about education within communities so that we can then see the value of the young girl. Because Janet reminded us, the other Janet, I'm Jeanette, Janet, reminding us about how, in terms of the impact on us as girls and women, our value is always negative because we are sold, we are traded. And so if we can turn that around and we can show communities that we have as much economic value as the boy child in terms of how they are valued, how they are educated, then I think what I've seen over the years when I've traveled to a number of communities is when this happens, then, you know, you see a change. If we used to tell this story, let me tell you very quickly, that was used in education where there was the tribe, and Paige and Tox might have heard it, the tribe of the one-footed women, right? And they were in total ignorance, and they thought the world was lovely until a woman arrived from another tribe with 2 feet. And they looked at her and they said, well, that woman's got 2 feet and is able to walk. But when we get up with our one, we fall over, you know? And we who are dependent on our women and children and men and our others, they are far from their tribe. Now, the far from the tribe presents another problem, but they, you know, it was about telling this story to say, when you empower the girl child, you then can see the value, the economic value of that. So I think it's the work about taking it to the communities, to work that is Janet and your work that you're doing there in Tanzania, and Forward's work in Africa as well, how we can bring that to the local, to these very brave women. Can you imagine working in a country where the president is not only an FGM denier, but a COVID denier? I mean,
yeah.
What bravery is that? So supporting brave women, and to students, totally with Tux. Anybody here who's here today or watching this film, you know, get engaged, find an organization, volunteer. I think it was Faye. Faye traveled with the UN and is informed and committed. So it's when we get the education, we can be informed, and then we can be part of the change, and change is happening.
Yes, I would just like to totally agree. I mean, put economic empowerment and education for girls, I think, is really key. That's where I would put the resources.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks. And we have a question from one of our participants. Have you seen the people dismiss your cause because they say that, you know, it's cultural, so it's not our business. We can't really solve the problem. And how do you reply when you get these types of comments? Thanks.
Well, I'll come back quick and say quickly, I just totally dismiss it. I just won't enter into that discussion. I choose not to, because I choose the right of the child.
Yeah.
That's where I stand. I don't stand with the adult and their argument for culture.
I think that's interesting, and I like what you said about just completely dismissing it. I think sometimes at the end of the day, you are going to face disagreement. You know, we've had that at Forward many, many times where people said, oh, it's not something happening here. Why should we care? It doesn't affect me. You know, we've even had professionals say that in front of us. And of course, that can stun some people, like, oh my gosh, you're a professional. How could you say that? But I think, firstly, it's important to remember, if someone's a professional and they're saying that, well, they have a legal obligation to actually safeguard a child. So that's my first response. But a second response is also just like what Tox was saying about, it's not just about that issue affecting you. It's about actually, this is something that's harmful. This is something that's a human rights violation. There's so many reasons why we should care. But I think sometimes because people perceive it as, you know, only a cultural practice that is happening far away, they don't consider that it's actually something that affects them here. So when I was saying like 137,000 women and girls in the UK, that might have shocked some people. Like, oh, actually it's happening here. That could be my neighbor, that could be my best friend, that could be my, you know, it could be anyone, it could be your colleague. And if you don't know how to approach that with sensitivity, then you're not going to be able to support that person. So I think that's kind of the best approach. And when we think about, again, things like patriarchal ideas, some of us might not agree with, for example, that girls should be considered beneath men. Most people might disagree with that. So if you disagree with that, then why couldn't you say the same for FGM, for example? So I think it's important just to kind of see the link in how it affects how other ideas and other social norms affect us. And yeah, I think that's kind of the approach to take. Yes, we should completely denounce it, but sometimes we have to have a rebuttal, and you have to challenge those thoughts. But of course, you're not going to change your mind straight away. You know, that's not how life works. But we're here to just have a discussion, right? So we're open to like discussions and dialogues and debates. But at the end of the day, we have a clear stance on where we stand with things.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. So it's a long process, but we need to be persistent.
Yeah.
Fai, you have a question.
Yeah, it's a quick question. So I know how the UN is becoming more and more vocal the last couple of years and engaged with humanitarian challenges that include like women and children. Like from my experience, I remember I was coming across many resolutions about abortion and women and children. And then OCHA had a big word on that, and UN Women and other UN agencies, as well as NGOs that have nothing to do with the UN. And I remember how the local governments and the local actors had a lot to do, especially in the resolution. So I was wondering, would it be a solution to forward more UN resolutions about this specific matter and maybe involve the local governance and the local agents as well as the UN personnel within the resolution, so it's become more like legitimized and in the paper? Thank you.
I think I would say that, you know, resolutions are sometimes as good as the paper is written on. It's really down to what I think Jeanette said earlier. It's about, you know, that change happen. You have to win the minds and, you know, hearts of people before they feel that they actually have any part to play in any resolution, law, or whatever. We do have one case where a woman has been convicted in the UK. And it just shows that regardless of what the law is or says, and the fact that, you know, there's that safeguarding entrenched in every single one of us, you know, our responsibility, be it professional or not, you know, these things still go wrong. And that's why I think, you know, winning the minds and educating is the best way. Prosecution or laws will not get us out of harmful practices like FGM, but really educating, you know, ensuring that people understand and showing also facts, figures, cases, stories, then people can begin to see, okay, this happened to real people, and it's not just anybody's other, you know, it's not just anywhere else, it's happening here. It's a matter for me too. And when someone can say that, then resolutions will make a difference.
Thanks. Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone. Thanks a lot for participating and for joining us. Let's hope that all our programs and efforts work. I'm sure they will with our effort. And let's hope that our community, LSE community, gets more and more involved in addressing violence against women and girls. Thank you. Thanks again.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor.
Thank you.
Professor, can I just thank Cora and members of the
Yes.
society, because this is the second year that I've known of them putting this on. I had the privilege to do the live one last year with the amazing Hebu Wadiri, a survivor, and she talked about her book, The Cut. And thank you, Cora, and to all your members of your societies, keep up the good work. Thank you.
Thank you, Cora.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. I think that's everything for today. We've gone slightly over, but it's not too bad. So I'd like to say thank you to all of our speakers. And if you have any more questions for them, get in contact. I'm seeing that Forward has just put some details in the chat, and obviously Janet gave them earlier, and I'm sure Jeanette would be happy as well. So if you have any
I
questions.
just wanted to say that we can send the, because we didn't finish the presentation, there's a lot in there that could be relevant, so we can send that over as well.
That would be great. So yeah, if you have any more questions, get in contact with them. Thank you to our speakers, thank you to our chair, and have a good day, everyone. So that's